Welcome to the British Chamber of Commerce Singapore's podcast channel. We're excited to bring you season 3 of new episodes featuring in-depth content across Singapore, ASEAN and the United Kingdom. We've had some extraordinary guests on our channel, including Formula One's Claire Williams.
I'm a firm believer that any great team, any successful team has a great culture flowing through it. You aren't successful if you don't. So we put a lot of work into this.
Renowned mountaineer Kenton Cool.
There, 2019, there with a client, a big storm came in and literally destroyed Camp 2. And I've got some video footage of Sherpas like trying to hold on to the tent fabric as it blows away. And
the Royal Navy's Commodore Steve Morehouse, commander of the UK Carrier Strike Group.
The squadron of F-35 aircraft we have on board is a Royal Air Force squadron, and the personnel there are drawn from both the Navy and the Air Force. So, what better way of showing just the efficiency and the joined-up nature that we now have.
And distinguished Sky News anchor Jeremy Thompson.
We had 2 little vans with satellite links, and we leapfrogged up the road to Pristina, the capital, throughout that first day, with non-stop coverage from basically inside a war zone.
We also sit down with the likes of TikTok, Twitch and Twitter and continue to bring you conversations around business and trade, leadership and people, sustainability, sports and arts and much, much more. Thank you, as always, for your support and we hope you enjoy this podcast.
Hello and welcome. This podcast edition is brought to you by the British Chamber of Commerce Women in Business Committee. My name is Nicole Wharfe and I'm the Regional Sales Director at SIRVA BGRS, and today we'll be discussing the current challenges and shortfalls faced when relocating to another region. We'll focus specifically on the Asia region, including China and the UAE. Now, this topic of interest came about following a discussion within our committee meeting. In acknowledging the post-pandemic movement that has eased in varying degrees, depending on where you are referring to, we also questioned how the pandemic continues to challenge this ease of movement, and also in the haste to relocate, perhaps having waited for so long to do so, what elements and details are being overlooked by both the assignee and their company in supporting their move. Often this can be the needs of the dependent, i.e. the partner and or the children. Now, SIRVA offers integrated end-to-end relocation solutions, including household goods, moving services, and localized expertise for relocation worldwide. Our solutions are tailored specifically for your needs, whether it's setting up a regional office in Singapore or relocating 100 employees to California. We have 950 plus locations across 177 countries, and not only own our own moving company, Allied, who many of you listening to this may be familiar with. Our key differentiator is being able to provide a full 360 support throughout the whole process or relocation to ensure you and your people are well cared for. As you can imagine, doing what we do, we see some wonderful stories of new lives starting in far-off places. We also, unfortunately, and often against our own advice, see a lack of preparation and appreciation of what needs to be supported when moving to another location across the world, wherever it may be, another region within the region. The purpose of this discussion is to just highlight the need for more inclusivity within the thought process for mobility teams and to provide assignees with some insights into elements of moving that they may just not have thought about. Joining me today are my colleagues Echo Lai and Julia Truscott. Now, Echo is the Director for Global Account Management, previously Country Manager for SIRVA China, and has worked across the full spectrum of destination services, including immigration, real estate, tenancy management, and expense management. And Julia is the Senior Manager for Service Delivery and is a subject matter expert in all things moving and relocation. And she's been based in Dubai for over 16 years. Welcome, ladies, and it's really wonderful to have you join me today. Now, I know we're all spread across the world, and it's a testament to kind of what we do and also the topic today. So you've got hands-on experience, both moving yourself and living in these locations and observing the challenges that we come across. Echo, I'm going to start with you. So just you're currently in Shanghai, China. And how are things there today? Obviously, we've heard a lot of varying changes about how the circumstances are pre-post-COVID, during. How are things going?
Hi, Nicole. I think it is really the best timing that we have a chat. I think after a very miserable lockdown for almost 2 months' time, we finally waited and received a good update that the quarantine measurement in China now reduced to 7 days. Plus, you still need to do health monitoring. But then it is a very good positive sign that the country is welcoming people to return, or of course, new assignees and their families. So things are going to the right direction. That's what I can tell you.
That's great. That's great. So there's going to be a lot of people as well kind of itching to get into their new location, having waited for a while or put off their move. And perhaps they've overlooked certain things in doing so, in the speed. And Julia, you're in Dubai or the UAE, one place that's synonymous with attracting expats. Some may say providing a soft landing for the first time assignees. Would you agree with this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Dubai especially, although like you say, we are the UAE, but most people do relocate to Dubai, and our country is one of the most welcoming. We're actually quite westernized compared to some of the other Middle Eastern countries. And to be honest, we've been busier now than we have been pre-pandemic. It started last year when we had it was supposed to be Expo 2020. Obviously, for reasons, it was delayed. So we had it in 2021, and we had never seen so many people arrive in the country, and it's just continuing to carry on. It's a great place to be. I've been here, as you say, for just over 16 years, and I don't want to be anywhere else at the moment, be totally honest with you.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And presumably you are seeing that influx of, I know certainly here in Singapore, we're hearing of a few people considering Dubai as being the next move potentially. Are you seeing that influx of numbers coming in of new assignees?
Definitely, from all over the world, I have to say. We're lucky enough that we are open to every country. We don't have quarantine rules. We are still very cautious. We still have guidelines, as in wearing masks out in public. But overall, we're in a pretty good place considering, what other countries are going through still.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, now, Echo, you say it's brilliant news. Obviously, China is moving in the right direction. That's fabulous, and we've also heard Hong Kong is the same, in the sense that they've reduced quite considerably their quarantine rules. Now, I referenced earlier this kind of haste to get moving and get people moved in. Now things are easing, inverted commas, but what, in your opinion, have you observed or do you sense is being overlooked in considering the move in? I suspect if people are itching and they're prepared, they were prepared 6 months ago, a year ago, there could potentially be some things that they're just not taking into account now, or perhaps have forgotten. What would you? I'm also going to ask specifically if you could almost talk to the mobility leads in the companies as well, because often assignees are directed by their company as to what they're able to provide. So what are your thoughts on that?
Definitely, I think with this whole pandemic, I think it actually shaken things up a little bit, because previously I think relocation is mostly driven by the business decision makers. So if they want to, let's say, make a change, create a product, conduct a training, they just send people, go on assignment, and then that's it. Of course, they do care the relocation experience, but from a design perspective, it is more to bring the people there there and that's it. But we are seeing more and more mobilities, they are trying to get involved in that business decision process. So not only we need to do this efficiently and, with a reasonable cost, they want to make sure employee also enjoy this, especially their accompanying family member, regardless that spouse or children, or even, let's not forget, our animal friends. They could have pets as well. So in the mobility package, previously, I think things are quite standard, but they are now having a lot more flexible provisions introduced. So in a way, those benefits provided is more tailored for the family. Let's say cross-cultural training if that needed to be, and they also have some additional support if they do have pets. And of course, a lot more discussion, like pre-mobilization discussion with the family, just to prepare them. Because I think people are so much more worried than before. Before they move, they just buy a ticket. But now, before they move, they will ask, whether Shanghai, use Shanghai as an example, that if we go into lockdown again, how company going to support me? And they may have other questions concern them. Let's say my children has this concern, how are you going to support them to make sure my children get established? And just recently, we had some children, this boy in particular is gifted in math. How can we make sure this person has the right school? I think a lot of people think a lot more before they decided to travel because they realize it is such a big decision to make.
Mm-hmm. And certainly with China, there's been quite a lot of coverage about their choices around how they manage the COVID situation. And so with that, I can imagine for assignees, there's a little bit of trepidation around, well, do we hold back? Do we do it? Do we, when is the right time to actually take the leap? And like you say, what if it goes backwards? But, certainly you mentioned settling in destination services. That's great to know that there's more companies that are recognizing the need. And I guess in the point of the assignee, if they hear this conversation and destination services or pre-moving services haven't been discussed, then hopefully they will be in a position to know what questions to ask and push back, perhaps.
Exactly. And I think that's really give us the opportunity to, set expectation. A lot of times, if they know what they are going into, even they will face challenges down the line. We all know relocation is not going to be perfectly smooth, but at least they are prepared mentally. And of course, we will be working together with their mobility to offer solutions and trying to be creative. I think one thing we do notice is in the past, we have a playbook to follow, but these days every single move is unique and we need to be very creative.
That's such a brilliant point. Absolutely. Because, and Julia, I'm going to come to you and almost ask you the same question with respects to, what's overlooked. But, we're in planning these moves and finally getting to the time of the move. But just to bring in something that Echo mentioned was about setting expectations. There's only so much we as a mobility company can control. Any shipping delays, unfortunately, they may be out of our control and what have you. But have you found that these elements have needed to be reiterated? Do you feel the same, that the liaison that's happening before and after has become greater for your assignees?
Yeah, definitely. I think for us, the sooner we speak to the assignees and their spouse, I think it's really important that the spouse, whether they be male or female of the employee, their needs and thoughts and worries and are all taken into consideration. So the sooner that we can speak to these people, give them advice, a lot of people will look online for properties, for the country, the do's, the don'ts, that kind of thing. But it's completely different when you speak to somebody that's lived here. I mean, myself and my whole team, we've all relocated to the UAE. We've all been through it. When I arrived, I had absolutely no help at all. I was stuck in an apartment on my own for 3 days because my husband was on business. And I think even if I'd had somebody that I could just pick up the phone and say, can I just ask a stupid question? For us, there's no stupid questions. And I think if you have children and there's schooling, that needs to be spoken about long before the actual relocation process, because, we've had some assignees that will not relocate because the schooling's not right, or they don't have the needs for their children. So, the more that we can help in advance of the actual relocation is better for everybody. And I think for the companies as well, because, unfortunately, if the assignee's been offered this fantastic job, fantastic benefits, but it's not always about what you get. It's about your quality of life, your happy marriage, happy children. It's a huge step. So definitely, prepare, and however we can help with our knowledge, what we've been through. And Echo's absolutely right. Every single family person is individual. There are no stereotypes anymore. So, that's what we're here for. And that's the benefit of what we can do to help.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I suspect that there is kind of a pre-assumed way that you may live a life in Dubai, much like in when people come to Singapore, it's seen as a holiday destination as well as an expat assignee location, and therefore there could be some preconceived ideas. And what do you think, in your opinion, when it comes to the UAE? Kind of is, you mentioned it earlier, it's very different when you live there, and I'm sure those differences are as positive as they can be challenging. But what are the things that you've seen or experienced yourself, perhaps, that you wish you'd known beforehand?
I wish I'd learnt more about the culture and the religion. I've not converted, but it's just respect of where you're living. We're very, very lucky here. We have over 200 different nationalities that live in this country. Everyone gets along. We don't have violence. We don't have racism. But to understand the culture, even to the point where we have a mosque every 500 meters in this country. And it may be a very, very small mosque just beside a shopping mall that nobody even realizes is actually a mosque. But explaining to the person that this mosque is going to have the call to prayer 5 times a day. And in the summer, when the sun rises early, it can start 4:30 in the morning. So it's those kind of things that, people that come here on vacation, they stay in the great hotels that are on the beach, but everyday living is everyday living. I mean, I wish I had the beautiful suntan that everybody thinks you have living in this country, but I don't. I work, I do the normal things: housework, cook, look after the cats, look after the husband. It's not like this major glamorous, housewives of Dubai. It's not real. So I think just catching up with someone, just having a talk, not necessarily about this is what your company can do. We can help with a home search. We can do this. We can do that. Have a general discussion about what life is going to be like. And I think that's the main thing and again, it's not so much for the assignee, but for the wife, just so she can simply know, I can get the kind of spices that I use in my home country, or, I can buy this particular brand. We still have veganism here. We still have gluten-free, all these things. They're not unknown to us, but some people do think Middle Eastern country, is it going to be the same as Western? It really is. And that's for us to give them that confidence and let them know that what they need, if they can get it here.
Yeah, and enable them to navigate, I guess, the routes in which to find them, which might be a bit different to where they're originally from. And Echo, with yourself, now we've mentioned kind of the more ground level elements. Certainly I'm guilty of being, when I first landed in Singapore, I was quite taken aback, for example, about the size of houses and apartments, living. And, at the moment we are in Asia amongst, just much like the globe, having this perfect storm of accommodation accessibility. It's quite challenging both on a temp and permanent position. But, with that being quite a ground level, like you say, Julia, this is about your day-to-day living. What certain things, not just in China, but I know you're experienced across Asia, would you say are the real nuances that people should be mindful of? And indeed, perhaps, again, push back to their mobility teams if they have any concerns about them.
Sure. I think there are a lot of things you need to really consider when it comes to grant. And I think it's very natural that sometimes we just limit relocation itself to find a house and find a school, and that's it. But actually, a lot of things need to be taken into account. Julia, you mentioned about the culture bit. And of course, we talked a little bit more about other elements of the relocation. Again, to have SIRVA that we hold their hands is basically to ensure that they can prioritize those tasks. Because it's quite important. Sometimes, for example, this person has household goods. And as what you mentioned, you're probably very surprised if you're coming from a country with large properties and come to a APAC region, you have a small apartment, your furniture won't fit. And you need to have that level of guidance that what to expect, size of the property, what the typical community looks like. And if you come over here, which bank you should go to have a bank account. It means a lot of things that we need to, help the employee have a checklist and make sure you should, do certain things first. And then the other things you can do a bit later, and also have them to have an open mind. Of course, everybody wants to find the ideal home, ideal school. But it's not going to happen in certain cases. You need to have a backup plan. You need to open for, different options. Maybe you're used to a house living lifestyle, but now embrace the apartment on a smaller size. So you don't have to clean the apartment so much. So again, we need to kind of outline pros and cons, be very consultative and direct. Because I think we also don't want to confuse, let's say, providing a service. It's just to say yes to everything. You also need to tell them what is possible, what is not, and then give them option to choose. So I think this is really the consultative part we need to really focus and grow into.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, in that there's going to be options. They may not necessarily be the options that either the mobility team want to put into whatever program or package, or indeed the assignee, but there is options. It's perhaps about considering these things slightly differently. Now, we mentioned earlier about education, we mentioned about culture, and linking all these things together, as from an inclusivity perspective, there are obviously some elements of perhaps personal orientation, so LGBTQ plus, which are not quite as advanced as there may be in the West. Is there, these elements and discussions that should be considered as well? I mean, certainly in Asia and UAE, there's laws around certain things which may not be what you're used to, but indeed, knowledge is key, right? So I guess, Echo, would you agree? And again, even coming down to children with perhaps additional needs, what is the accessibility to this kind of support and acceptability in society?
Well, I think I'm going to be honest. I think for China in particular, we still have a long way to go. But then, of course, you need to kind of answer this question depending on you're looking into a tier 1 city, let's say Beijing, Shanghai, versus a bit more remote city in China. I would say remote city, you may find a bit struggle there. But tier 1 cities, let's say Shanghai, Beijing, there are facilities that tailored for this group of people, that they will feel a lot more welcomed in that sense. But I think from our perspective is we need to be mindful if this a particular employee has such concern, we need to make sure information is provided to them timely. And we need to have that empathy to understand and tell them, yes, you could be challenged, but these are the facilities that you can reach out to, ask for help. And if their children require special support, there are special education facilities available in China, or you can get a tutor if you want. I think generally speaking, for the APAC region, I'm very fortunate. I feel this region overall, China in particular, people are all very friendly, willing to accept, and always here to help. So I think we always encourage our employee, just speak up. What are you concerned? Because if you don't say, we can never, help you. But in order for them to really speak up, is to build that bond with your employee. I think it's absolutely critical. We're acting as their friends, have a heart-to-heart conversation and really define how can we be here in the most appropriate way.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just to mention as well, and I'm going to pose the same question to yourself, Julia, but I think also it's important to acknowledge that this is a staff retention issue as well. We said earlier, you mentioned earlier, happy wife, happy partner, happy kids. Yeah, absolutely. That feeds into what we're, an added layer that has come through regarding the Great Resignation, the Great Reshuffle. I've seen it here in Singapore for whatever reason. Partners, children have become, they've got itchy feet. They've become nostalgic to home. They've started getting frustrated, what have you, and they've left. Now, in reality, they want to come back very quickly in some respects, or in many cases. But if we as an organization can provide this information and even by this podcast share enough for people to go out and look more into things, then hopefully for mobility teams, this also supports retaining quality staff, because people won't leave. They're happy, they're settled. But in your opinion, with the UAE, going back to the inclusivity of the environment for kids and partners of all different genres and orientation, how would you think it plays in the UAE, and what do you think needs to be shared perhaps for awareness?
It's quite a difficult subject here in the UAE, because same-sex marriages, partnerships are completely illegal. It happens, don't get me wrong, but it's not something that's not displayed or talked about. So it's if we know that a couple relocating, we would have to tell them basically the rules of the land, and then it's entirely up to them or their company. We have had companies that have same-sex couples move out here, but it's not something, I'm not saying we don't condone it, but we have to tell them the law in the UAE, because it can be punishable by prison sentence or deportation. That's not to be too dramatic on the subject, but if we didn't give that information, we're not doing our job as a company as well. But I think, going back to keeping the spouses happy and keeping them in the country, it's our job to tell them what they can get out of being here. We find that in the summer, our school holidays are quite long. So they go from pretty much the end of June to the beginning of September. It is so hot here. If you're not used to it, your first summer, maybe, it's not too bad. By the second summer, you're like, no, I'm done. I've had enough. So normally the wives and children go back to their home countries for the summer. It's quite funny because you see the men in the supermarkets, not a clue what they're supposed to buy, but it's very much a quieter city in the summer all round. But for the people that do stay here, for the children, the government are aware. You can't just go and play in the street, go in the park. It's totally unbearable. So they put on big sporting events they use the exhibition centre. So the halls that all winter are used for exhibitions, they turn it into this huge sports centre that, the wives, the children, the husbands can go and keep active, because, you know, that's another thing. If you just can't go out and do normal exercise, you want to keep active through the hot months as well. So I think it's, you know, we're here to give all this information about what they can do. You know, we're advise them to get into a group. I think it's easier if they do have children that are at schools, because they get to meet other mums, and maybe there's school groups, and some schools do summer activities and things like that. So I think to encourage them to not just sit at home and wait for the husband to come home from work, because we're one of those countries that you work hard here. So it's not always a 9-to-5 job. We're kind of a hub for the Middle East as well. So the firm may be based in Dubai, but the assignee could be traveling across the Middle East. You know, again, I can refer back to myself. When I first moved here, my husband was traveling so much, he would leave on a Sunday morning and get back on a Thursday afternoon. So, you know, don't shut yourself off. I think that's the main thing. Get out there, make yourself some friends. I know sometimes if you're on your own, get a job. That sounds really harsh, but, you know, stop yourself from going crazy, because I think if I hadn't have got myself a job, I'm not the kind of person that could have just sat at home doing housework, waiting for somebody to come home. So, you know, that's a really important thing, that don't get yourself into that rut, which you could get in any country, quite frankly. Absolutely. You know, it doesn't matter where you are, but I think the more you make yourself do things and be involved in things, you're not going to feel like you're on your own, and that you want to leave the country, because it's not the country's fault at all. So I think embrace what you have and make the most of it.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you for your really kind of honest and succinct approach to that question, because I understand it sometimes these topics can be you know, a bit sensitive to address, and certainly no offense ever intended, but the reality is that certainly when it comes to Singapore, you know, we are a guest here, and so and much like with the UAE, and you know, we and in other areas of Asia as well, there's varying laws and degrees of laws, and so subsequently, as you say, you absolutely, you know, it doesn't take much to whittle down the benefits and what you should or shouldn't wish to do, depending on what your interests are. Now, it's really interesting that you say about going out and getting a job. And actually, you know, many partners that go on assignees do indeed do that. And certainly that opens up a social circle. There is changing laws here in Singapore, which I should absolutely mention around, for the listeners, around the ability to work for those partners or those dependents that come over. And so anybody listening should absolutely make sure they look at the MOM website accordingly. But actually, there's some great networks, and I know it's the same in Dubai and in China. There's some great expat and, you know, expat networks and great networks around, you know, what your interests are, reading, sports, whatever the case may be. Facebook's a great location to find those. Also through chambers, much like the British Chamber, and also online accounts like Sassy Mama, or, you know, such things like that they have here in Singapore. Now, you mentioned the weather. I'm so pleased you mentioned the weather, because it's absolutely unavoidable in UAE. It's always roasty toasty, much like here in Singapore to a certain degree. I have to say, my parents, whenever they come here, they say, oh, it's looking like it's going to rain on the weather tomorrow. And I constantly reply to them, yes, it's every single day. The weather in Singapore is predicted to be 28 to 34 degrees with a chance of rain. So you don't need a coat. But that said, last time we spoke, Julia, it was raining in Dubai.
I know it was. I actually just remembered that, but it's absolutely a beautiful day today. The last couple of days, actually, we had a sandstorm
Oh, wow.
Which I mean, they happen. We're in the middle of the desert, but it's kind of like fog, but brown. So the visibility is not there. But yeah, we do have a lot of rain when it comes to winter. But at the moment, middle of August, we are reaching 50 degrees at the moment.
Wow. You can fry an egg on a stone, I'm sure. And one thing that I've noticed here, and again, I wish this is something that I'd fully appreciated, but the level of humidity does affect your belongings. So you've got to be aware of that as well. I suspect that you have that, do you, in Dubai?
The humidity is probably worse than the actual heat. So when you get both of them together, it's, you walk outside, the glass is mist up. You have to take them off for a couple of minutes to try so you can see again. It can get just as bad, but we kind of live with it now.
You get used
to it.
Anything.
Yeah, AC
absolutely.
is the wonder. We don't have heating at all. We just have AC.
Yeah, same. And actually, it's the beauty of aircon, which I can say because I know the UK specifically has had a tremendous summer period, but obviously it's hard to cope with without any aircon. Echo, just to really quickly ask you as well, about some exactly that ground level stuff, and that it's funny we're sat here talking about the weather, but it is something that's really overlooked. And China, I mean, you have 4 seasons, right?
I wish to say yes, but I think with extreme weather these days, we have a very long summer, we have a long winter, and then very, very, very brave spring and autumn. But yes, we do have. I can certainly welcome you both. Come over here, join me to enjoy your leather jacket, for example, for exchange.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And how does your seasons work? So is your winter your winter would be now, right?
Now it's really, really hot. I think it's because I'm talking with Julia on the line. So right now we're 40 plus temperature wise. So I put you to blame. So hopefully after this call, we'll get cooler.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, I know we've had a good half an hour talking all things mobility, all different considerations from, education to housing to, as I say, climate, and all the different elements of consideration when you get on the ground before. Now, I'd really like to just ask you finally, Julia, if you could give perhaps your top 3 best practices, both for the mobility teams that are considering their programming, right through to the assignee as well. If you could share any key best practices or advice, that would be great.
I think the top one is prepare. So don't move next week. I think the more advanced notice you have, you can do your own research. If you're lucky enough to use us, we can help you. If you have children, the schooling definitely is more important. And think about what you want out of the relocation, not just as in the job wise or the home. What do you feel you want to get most of? Do you want to live in the heart of the city? Do you want to live outside? Am I going to drive? All these things you need to take into consideration, and we'll say the best way to get the most out of it. But I think, just for me, I had 3 weeks between knowing I was moving and moving to Dubai.
Wow.
I didn't even have much chance to pack, to be honest. But I think if you have the time to think and do the research and ask the questions, like I said earlier, there are no stupid questions at all. So I think that's the key, is to just plan ahead and think what you want.
Do you know, I think one of the most impactful things you said earlier with reference to this question was the point about you are going to be living your life. in so much as, you're going to be doing the washing, you're going to be doing the grocery shopping, as much as the excitement may feel like you're going on an extended holiday, the normal things come into play. And those are the things, right, that you need to plan for. There's only so many Saturday brunches you can do before you just, want a normal day. So that's great. Thank you. And to yourself, Echo, as well, with respects to Asia, what would you put forward as your kind of key practices, both for the mobility teams and perhaps the assignee?
Sure. I think for assignee, I cannot agree with you further, Julia. Be prepared certainly is very important. But in our experience, I would say also have an open mind and try something new is very important as well. Because sometimes if you just really reject this idea, like forever, you will never really enjoy a wonderful time here. So I often see family want to find the same cereal they eat back home. Try something different here. They may taste equally yummy or even better. And then, of course, try different classes. I think I heard a lady talking about an expats family community. Go try something. I actually joined an expat's wife to learn cooking lasagna, although I don't have an oven myself. But it's fun just to meet friends and, get to know each other a little bit. And from a mobility perspective, personally, again, I feel it's important that think out of box, because I think it's very normal that we just follow the guideline for an assignment versus for permanent move. But then think out of box. We now see as part of the retention, some company even offer international education for permanent relocating employees up to number of years. We know it's very unlikely because typically it's for expats, but they offer this just to, get the family settled a bit easier, give them this level of support to get their commitment to stay with company longer. Because even permanent move, they don't spend as much money as an assignee, but they still an asset to the company. So again, open mind, be prepared, creative, jump out of the box. I think APAC has a lot of exciting things happening, and we'll certainly be here, planning ahead and see how you're going to work the best.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think certainly for me, I've been here 6 years in Singapore, and I was having a chat with a friend yesterday, and we realized that during COVID, the kind of impact of not being able to have that great selling point about Singapore, which is to travel and to go locally and nip on a plane for 2 hours and nip to an island and what have you. Or I'm sure it's the same with Dubai for 6 hours, back in the UK and other places. But, now to be able to have that and embrace it, and to have that take in your adventurous spirit all over again, is really great. And the more you push your boundaries, I guess, the more you're going to get out of your experience. The one thing that I think I would also highlight is to the mobility teams, don't be afraid to reassess your policy and your programs. If you see the needs of your staff and assignees changing, then feel comfortable to review your policy, your internal policy around mobility. On average, perhaps once it's done once a year, maybe a bit more, or once you join a full service mobility company. But when the needs of the assignees change, it's important to have that transparency and that structure, because we've mentioned, I think, all of us, about transparency and about communicating and being really honest with what you're going to be going into in an exciting way. So it's important that the company has that as well. So thank you so much for joining me, Echo and Julia. It has been an absolute pleasure. Have you got any final words, perhaps, on the topic?
Just come. APAC is a very exciting destination.
Yeah, that's so true.
I was actually just going to say exactly the same. Yeah.
Oh,
I want to go to yours for the exciting ski resort for summer.
Well, it just goes to show that, I mean, certainly there is a huge amount of opportunity coming out of both regions. And I'm sure there's a lot of companies that are looking at moving their people respectively. So, there is always an opportunity for you to gain that insight during the process of moving via a company like ourselves, SIRVA BGRS. And, do your own research. That's the biggest message, I think, as well. Research. Ask questions. No silly question. They're all good questions. So thank you very much for listening, everybody. And thank you again, Julia and Echo. It's been a pleasure. And we will see you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the British Chambers Podcast. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe, and why not leave us a rating and review on Spotify, Apple, Google, and the other podcast platforms. For more information, please visit our website at www.britcham.org.sg and tune in next time for a brand new episode.